I seen one ship go down with over 700 passengers aboard, seeing dead people on the ice.
On a à peu près 350 épaves de recensées près des îles. On en connaît à peine une quinzaine.
Lots of treasure around the island, that's for sure. For sure.
There's all sorts of amateurs walking all over the islands with metal detectors, and they're finding a lot of stuff.
And it's not all just a dream.
I have a friend, a diver, you know, Mario Cyr.
Les histoires de Leonard fait partie de moi.
The Magdalen Islands sit isolated in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, surrounded by sea and 5 Canadian provinces beyond the horizon. Wherever we stand, the sea watches and speaks in surf. It gives and takes away, turning islanders into fatalists. In the end, the sea always decides. Over 350 recorded shipwrecks surround the islands. Only 15 have been found. Shaped like a fishhook, the archipelago has caught many mariners coming its way. High winds and shallow sands have been perilous to ships ever since the time of the Vikings. This underwater cemetery hides its vessels, buried deep in sand, making archaeological missions both complex and expensive. What secrets do these shipwrecks hold? Answers, treasures, stories that haunted the mind of Leonard Clark.
My grandfather was from Finland. He was wrecked here. My wife's grandfather was a shipwrecked. He was from the Jersey Islands. That's why probably I got such an interest in ships. My grandmother's house was the meeting place for all of the old people. I'd be sitting there listening, and it looked like a disease. I caught it. Shipwreck research is one research that is very hard. I had a good knowledge before I even went to any archive.
Tell us what you know about your grandpa.
Well, he's always really loved history. Like, he has bookcases full of books about all kinds of historic things, whether it be about the Indians, about the war, about sunken ships, everything. He has those maps that he did, and he worked a really long time on those. He used to go around with his metal detector all the time.
Leonard did a lot of research in England. Well, actually, Leonard was more interested in the history of the islands than I was at that time.
Leonard was definitely one of the first amateurs of that sort. He definitely thought like a researcher, like a scientist, you know, could contribute as much as any, you know, archaeologist who'd gone to grad school.
I got to meet him at first, and then trying to see how he went about his research in a very respectful way, because he breathes that maritime culture, as all tous les Madelinos breathe it. But he's one of the safekeepers of the past.
Ils avaient fait une maison chez eux avec des pièces de bordées qu'il y avait chez les vieux bateaux, puis les trous avaient resté. Il dit contre les trous qu'il pouvait voir. C'est le fun, il est le fun à écouter.
Leonard est passionné, il est passionnant aussi. C'est un monsieur là, qui est très connaissant dans l'histoire des îles, beaucoup au niveau des naufrages, beaucoup au niveau des morses également.
Leonard, il a pêché les homards. Oui. Il a pêché pas mal dans les...
Fishing was never a lifetime career with him. He was always into something different. His greenhouses were extremely popular here. Then he got into strawberries. He had a mink farm at one point in time. I know in 1971, he was the mayor of Gros Isle. He was into everything. Uncle Leonard was one of the few Magdalen Islanders who didn't stop at any one thing.
Par rapport au bateau que je cherche, il m'a donné des informations qui étaient très pertinentes. Moi, je l'ai connu, Leonard, quand il a commencé à écrire ce qu'il savait, parce que c'est bien qu'il l'ait fait. S'il a fallu que ça parte sans que ça soit écrit, ça serait dommage.
He spent so many hours at it, and he researched almost basically worldwide.
As you know, Leonard's own family can be traced back to survivors of shipwrecks. He talked a lot about, you know, what might lie buried in the sand. I have no doubt that there might well be something out in those areas.
Mario Cyr is a commercial diver and world-renowned underwater cameraman. He has worked on 130 documentaries in 54 countries. Mario was born and grew up on the Magdalen Islands, listening to Leonard's shipwreck stories.
Quand j'ai commencé à côtoyer Leonard, c'est bien sûr par rapport aux épaves. Moi, je parlais pas beaucoup anglais et Leonard ne parlait pas beaucoup français, mais on essayait de tous dire. On avait, qui était mon ancienne femme d'époque, Lynn, qui était parfaite bilingue. Donc, souvent, elle nous arrêtait, attendez. Puis, écoute, moi, j'avais vraiment peur qu'il fasse des crises de cœur, ce gars-là, quand il s'emballait complètement quand il parlait des épaves. Donc, il était extrêmement excité. On est à peu près à 2000 et demi à l'est de Pointe-aux-Loups. Et quand on transporte ça sur la carte de Leonard, en 2001, je travaillais sur un projet pour monter des expéditions pour trouver des épaves aux îles. Je sais qu'à un moment donné, je vais m'investir beaucoup plus à fond parce qu'on a des trésors inestimables ici.
I'm sure that there's around at least 1,000 wrecks of Magdalenes, without a question. Some of them had valuable cargoes. I've spent my entire life at this work to find out the story of the Magdalenes.
pas assez unique comme géologie, la remontée des dômes de sel pour monter le fond marin. Il y a un dôme de sel pour Havre-Robert, l'île Cap-au-Mol, Havre-Moindon, Pointe-aux-Loups, Grosse-Île et Grande Entrée, et l'île Bréon et l'île d'Entrée.
The salt domes created the islands and support today's local economy. However, this natural resource is not what attracted the First Nations and Europeans. Why are there hundreds of shipwrecks surrounding the Magdalen Islands? What were all these ships doing here? What were they after?
Here the Klondike is 18, 11, 17, 14, 20. Wherever there's perch, we'll put the flatfish. We'll use mostly mackerel, 2 mackerel here. See, this one here is good. And then you gotta check underneath for spawn. See, that's not allowed taking them ones. My great-grandfather, Alan Clark, that's be Leonard's father. He had his boat tied up to the wharf here in Old Harry, and he loaded his boat with the codfish. And they had a wooden wharf, like coming out here. You'll see in the old footage of the 50s and that.
Long before Adam and Leonard Clark, Micmacs and Europeans exploited fish, seals, and whales. But it was another marine creature that established settlements and propelled the economy of the islands.
There was no place in North America with such an abundance of walrus as they had in Magdalene. And they wanted it for the oil and the ivory.
Il parle au-dessus de 200 000 morses. Là. Il y en avait au-dessus de 100 000. Ça a été probablement la première ressource financière importante aux îles. Là. Parce que c'était à cette époque-là beaucoup plus important que la pêche en termes de retombées économiques. Encore aujourd'hui, si on va se promener à Old Harry et qu'on fait attention là, en marchant, là, on peut trouver là, assez facilement des petites dents et des ossements aussi. Là.
The walrus would have been taken from outside at Seacow Pass and just basically herded like cattle inland to the killing area right here in this field here. It'd be several hundred at a time, and they would have been shot with a musket, and they would probably be 300-400 years old. You can use a metal detector, and you could find a lot of musket balls all over this field. Are you? Oh, good. I just found one there. It was really, really flat. Must have been a direct hit.
Walrus bone.
I bought a detector about 30 years ago, about 33 years ago. I used it a bit, but nothing like the last 3 years. My wife says it's an obsession, not a hobby.
Do you know Leonard Clark?
Yes, I've known Leonard for 40 years.
Did you ever go out metal detecting with Leonard?
Yeah, actually in 19 79. Yeah, and it was ironic. We both had the same type of detector, you know. And at that time, Leonard had found numerous musket balls all together, like I did, but he had found more actually. As far as treasure, we're not in the Caribbean, so I don't think the Spanish came this far up. Well, not with their treasure ships anyway. But again, it depends on what you call treasure. I've gotten like the old coins and the brooches and the rings and the axes. This, okay, just a junk of lead. But the significance of it is it was the cause of the extinction of the walrus in Magdalen Islands. Last one they saw here was in 1799.
Throughout the 19th century, human activity increased in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Timber trade brought tremendous marine traffic from Europe. Legions of ships sailed and sank around the archipelago, perpetuating the cycle of disaster and new beginnings.
I've always been interested in the people that come off these ships, in the people that have helped the people that's on the ship. I've always been interested in the emotional side of these shipwrecks.
The Miracle was a famine ship from Ireland, and they had the fever on board. It struck East Point, and James Allen Clark was the first Clark on the islands, and he settled at East Cape with his wife, Mary Goodwin. When the ship wrecked, they went down to try to save people, and she caught the fever, and she died as well. She's buried in East Cape. I think it was 180 people are buried in the sand dunes, like in unmarked graves.
Everything that washed ashore had an impact on the evolution of the island. Sometimes it was the materials, sometimes it was the people. Mm-hmm. You know, there's people who come ashore and they stayed ashore. They stayed here on the islands.
Leonard, my grandmother wrote it, and they had people brought in from shipwrecks when they were younger. They can still remember it. Yeah, my great-grandfather from Honolulu was one of them.
My grandfather was wrecked here in 1891. He was only a kid. He ran away from home, Belfast, Ireland, stowed away aboard this old boat that he thought was going to Sydney, Australia, when in fact it was going to Sydney, Cape Breton, and on the way up it struck Bryan Island over here. And he and two other young fellas, they stayed here on the island.
My great-grandfather, whose name was Paul Chanel, was shipwrecked on Bryan Island in the early 1800s, around 1830 or so, and he lived there. He brought his family up.
Il y a des Irlandais comme les Cummings, des Doyle, des Cassidy, des Queen, les Delaney sont des descendants de naufragés. Il y a eu même un bébé qui a été retrouvé dans une chaloupe qui avait été rejetée, puis il l'appelait Sophie la petite misère. Ça a toujours resté dans la tradition orale. D'ailleurs, c'est une de mes ancêtres, du côté de mon père.
Everybody who has a long family history on the islands is linked to a shipwreck one way or another. But in some cases, for instance, Leonard's case, some families are more deep into it. It is living history, basically, that's what it is. And it is fascinating to engage somebody who not only knows about history, but really transpires it and lives it.
The islands drastically change shape every season. Varying sea levels and shifting sands unveil new territories. New beaches emerge, miles long. New lands for wild foxes. New dunes for old ships.
Some of the lumber from the wrecks were sold at public auction. A lot of them was probably stolen because they had it piled on the beach, and they didn't have anybody watching that over day and night.
The Quango off Bryan Island, that went ashore with $1 million worth of grade A lumber headed for England to build homes. That lumber came ashore. That built Old Harry Church. A lot of people got their homes built from that ship. Sheds, barns, shipbuilding. They got their boats, the fishing boats. Amazing. So nobody died on the ship, but it really did.
It had a massive impact on the Magdalen Islands. These were things that people at the time needed, and there's no way they could afford. So in many ways, a study of the shipwrecks is a study of the history of the Magdalen Islands.
You can find driftwood on the beaches and different areas, old wood that you could assume comes from a shipwreck.
As archaeologists, we encourage people to always report archaeological sites, both on ground and underwater. It's, in fact, against the law to knowingly interfere or damage an archaeological site.
Le premier silo que j'ai fait dans du bois de départ, c'est dans ça. Il faut le tailler. On va essayer de faire un crayon avec ces deux morceaux-là. Ça, c'est du bois d'épave aussi. Et spécial, les deux clous sont restés dedans. Là.
Ma bibliothèque dans mon salon est faite avec ce
ouais?
bois-là de Locust Gill. Ouais. C'est intéressant de travailler avec de la matière que de l'histoire. J'aime mieux ça qu'aller chercher du bois à la quincaillerie. Je sais pas à qui ça appartient vraiment, mais en tout cas.
J'avais apporté une coupe de morceaux de bois que je voulais conserver, puis je savais pas trop quoi faire avec. Je faisais un bout de c'était ici des tiens à faire bateau. Celui-ci, je l'ai embelli un peu. J'ai mis de l'acajou. Ben, c'est pas vrai qu'il y avait de l'acajou, là. C'était plutôt le chêne qui était utilisé, l'érable. Moi, ça m'a pris 2 ans pour faire ça ici. Puis ça, c'est des fois travailler le samedi et dimanche, là, pas juste à l'heure, 8 heures par jour, là. Il faut mettre 12 heures. Ça, c'est du chêne d'épave. C'est ici que je m'amuse, parce que, ils peuvent rentrer un à la fois, là. Ça ici, c'est la boudeuse que je suis après de faire. Tu vois? Il y a beaucoup de gens qui vont commencer ça, puis la deuxième journée, ça va être fini. Oh, c'est trop long, c'est pas faisable, c'est pas trop, tu sais. Ça prend de la patience. Mais moi, je fais ça, puis tu sais, c'est comme si j'allais naviguer avec, comme si ce serait beau, puis tu sais, hein. J'y avais tout le temps pensé, d'en mettre un à l'eau. Ça pourrait se faire, mais j'ai jamais osé.
Magdalenos continue to discover relics from the deep, washed up on their beaches. But what about out there, under the sea? Sunken vessels trapped in a sandy cemetery. How many treasures are buried down there, waiting to be discovered?
I would always research. I would take my spare time, like on the weekends, and I would go research. Of the belief that shipping companies would be compelled by law to record wrecks, I made the map. I went to Lloyd's in London, went over to a lady at the desk, and he said, "What field are you working in?" Well, I said, "I'm working in shipwrecks."
Sable Island and the Magdalen Islands are 2 of our most important shipwreck sanctuaries.
There's a good chance that Leonard's map is quite an accurate map. In other words, we know where ships are around the islands. We know where those wrecks are.
Le problème des îles, c'est l'endroit est sur vraiment un haut fond et c'est un fond sablonneux. Après des tempêtes, on va sur des épaves, des fois ils sont disparus complètement, donc ils sont complètement sablés. Et on va tourner après une autre tempête, puis on va voir tout le côté de l'épave.
What you have in the Magdalen Islands is the potential of finding very old shipwrecks and very well-preserved shipwrecks.
Il y a beaucoup d'épaves qui sont trouvées grâce aux pêcheurs. Souvent, ils pensent que c'est une roche. Mais là, à un moment donné, il me parle de ça, puis il dit, c'est drôle, il dit, à cet endroit-là, il dit, il y a du char, puis tout à coup, il y a de quoi pour mettre 3 cages. Il dit, c'est pas grand. Là, j'ai allumé, il dit, c'est peut-être une épave. Je suis allé voir là. Et là, il n'y avait pas d'eau, il y avait 15 pieds d'eau. Tout à coup, je vois le boulet, la boule du canon qui est là. Juste la boule arrière. Ah, imagine-toi. Ah, puis c'est la première fois, là. Ah, je capotais. Ah, hallucinant, là. Il était en train de venir dingue dans le fond de l'eau.
When you find something, say a cannon, the thing to do is to leave it there. And it's obviously tempting to bring everything up. When you find something, you want to show people, right? And that's the first inclination. However, you have to resist that. And if you do find a shipwreck, you have to report it to the provincial and to the federal authorities. That's the proper thing to do.
Moi, je voulais essayer de retracer quelque chose, retracer le bateau. J'ai contacté l'archéologue qui avait le canal à Montréal, à l'Université de Montréal. Eux autres, ils m'ont conté des belles histoires. On va aller chez vous, on fait un projet, il va y avoir des archéologues, on va étudier l'épave, tout ça, là-dessus. J'ai jamais vu personne. Fait que ça m'a découragé. Fait qu'il y a 2 ans, je suis retourné sur l'épave, j'ai dit, je vais en sortir un, je vais l'amener chez nous. Puisque ça donne rien de... Ah, moi, je suis passionné quand je parle de ça. Il n'y en a pas beaucoup aux îles qui ont ça à côté de la maison. Il y a bien des pêcheurs, je suis convaincu, qui pêchent au mort sur des épaves, ils ne savent jamais. Tu vois, là, ici, il y a quelque chose, ça pourrait être une épave, cette partie-là. Là. Il y a une place que, à chaque année, j'allais plonger là, c'est une roche pas loin de chez nous. Il y a 2 ans, j'ai arrêté pour trouver ma roche. Il n'y en avait plus du tout. Elle était là, mais elle était complètement sablée. 47 33 688 61 39 487. Je te remercie beaucoup. Moi, le bateau que je cherche, c'est le Simcoe, le GCS Simcoe. C'est un bateau du gouvernement fédéral en 1917 qui a coulé autour des îles de la Madeleine. Un bateau de 180 pieds en acier. Il y avait 44 personnes à bord. Ils savent rien encore aujourd'hui de ce qui s'est passé de ce bateau-là. Mais Leonard Clark m'a donné de l'information qui était très pertinente.
Charles Cormier has discovered several shipwrecks around the islands, but his search for the Simcoe continues, while shifting sands cover and uncover new ruins underwater.
J'étais en train de pêcher au salut, puis mon salut a pris dedans.
C'est pareil, hein? 6,70 et 504.
Hello.
On voit très bien sur l'écho sonore quand on arrive sur l'épave. C'est tout haut comme ça, hein? Ça descend. On dirait que ça descend tout le temps un petit peu, ça se creuse un peu, puis ensuite on remonte sur l'épave.
Elle est vraiment dessus.
Ouais. Wow. Donc Pascal, quand on va arriver sur le bout de bord, on s'en va vers la terre, puis on devrait tomber dessus. Okay.
Leonard is convinced that there's a Viking ship somewhere in the sand at the tip of the islands.
The treasures that come through here would have been timber. The payroll ships would have been carrying paper money.
For me, monetary value is totally irrelevant. Within a wreck comes a sense of place. There's nothing like seeing objects on the shipwreck. For me, that's the pure treasure.
The treasure, for me, is the fish.
Non, moi c'est l'histoire. Regarde les Simcoe, il faut trouver ce bateau-là. Il n'y a pas de valeur. Je ne trouverais pas un coffre-d'or d'un bateau du gouvernement fédéral.
They say the Essex, which was the first registered sunken ship here, was carrying a load of gold coins.
That's what's fascinating about the whole aura around shipwrecks. It's the stories that are true, but also the legends. And for us, it's to try to make sense out of both.
I know where there's a couple of good cargoes on Magdalene, but I won't tell them. There's one I know is very good, and I know she's there. I got her coordinates, everything. I know where she is.
Leonard m'a confié ces coordonnées-là. On a déjà même, moi et lui, allé voir sur le site. Il n'y a rien d'apparent. Tout est sous le sable. C'est une épave qui devrait valoir aujourd'hui probablement aux alentours de 6 millions. Si on garde la valeur qu'il y avait à l'époque, donc il y avait de l'orfèvrerie, il y avait de la porcelaine de Chine, il y avait des tonneaux aussi de spiritueux. En 2001, c'était la première épave que je voulais rechercher. J'ai plein de documents aussi. On a trouvé même les blueprints de la construction du bateau. Et on a beaucoup d'informations. Mais monter une opération comme ça, on parle minimum 250 000 $. On trouvait une épave comme ça qui n'est pas tellement loin des côtes des îles de la Madeleine. Je pense que les médias se sont parés d'une histoire comme ça. Donc, tu ne peux pas rien cacher. Il faut que tout soit bien fait. Et moi, j'ai rencontré le receveur d'épave 2 fois sur cette épave-là. C'est sûr que ça, écoute, ça serait quelque chose qui serait extraordinaire à trouver.
When the sea swallows boats, it creates new ecosystems for life underwater. Some shipwrecks end up feeding the people of the sea, while others rest in sand, igniting their passions.
Leonard had that kind of optimism that not everyone needed to appreciate what he was doing or know about it. What mattered is that it had to be done.
We knew of Leonard's maps, of course, and you can only respect the amount of work that goes into one of those, and more specifically, the passion.
He was always very upset if he saw information come out that was incorrect. That really bothered him. Oh, he had great respect for Mario as a man, as a diver. But then Mario has always been interested in shipwrecks, and so who is the man to go to find out about shipwrecks?
Quand l'estime s'installe, il n'y a pas de barrière de langue, ni de religion, ni de couleur de peau. Puis là, on était reliés surtout par quelque chose qui nous passionnait énormément tous les deux.
People like Leonard, as they leave, we lose that connection to that generation who experienced firsthand those stories of shipwrecks, whose parents brought in shipwreck survivors, whose families built things with material they had salvaged from ships. I think we're lucky because Leonard has left us a great deal to work with in his research, but there's a lot more that has to happen.